The sound of the key turning in the lock had never sounded so different. It wasn't the usual 7:00 p.m. turn, the one that announced Alexander's arrival after a long day of work. This turn was faster, rougher, accompanied by muffled laughter and whispers I couldn't quite identify. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, just as I did every night since we got married. My 5-month pregnant belly brushed against the edge of the counter as I chopped vegetables for the salad. The house smelled of lemon rosemary roast chicken, Alexander's favorite recipe. I had lit candles in the dining room. I'd bought that Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon that I could no longer drink, but that he loved so much, and I had ironed his blue dress shirt for tomorrow. Everything was perfect. Everything was in its place. "Honey, is that you?" I asked without looking up from the knife. The response wasn't his voice. It was hers. "She's so domestic, isn't she? Like a little maid." The knife stopped half an inch from my index finger. I slowly raised my head as if the movement could change what my eyes were seeing. There was Alexander, my husband of 3 years, the father of my unborn child, leaning against the kitchen doorframe with a smirk I had never seen before. And next to him, a blonde woman in a tight red dress that left little to the imagination. She had her arms crossed and an expression of superiority that made my blood run cold. "Isabella," Alexander said, and my name on his lips sounded like a mockery. "Meet Christine, my coworker." Coworker. What an irony. I knew her perfectly well. I had been tracking her movements for 6 months. 6 months of saving screenshots, hotel receipts, and WhatsApp messages he deleted from his phone, all of which I had already printed and filed in a blue folder resting at the bottom of my closet. But I didn't say a word. "Hello, Christine," I said with a calmness that surprised even me. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" "There's plenty." Christine let out a nervous little laugh and looked at Alexander for approval. He nodded amused, as if he were watching a show designed exclusively for his entertainment. "Sure." "Isabella is an excellent hostess," he said, walking into the kitchen as if he owned everything, including my dignity. "She always knows how to receive guests." Guests. That word twisted like a dagger in my chest, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I learned a long time ago that tears are a currency, only the weak spend, and I had spent years building a treasure he knew nothing about. "Have a seat in the dining room," I said, drawing my hands on my apron. "I'll finish plating." Alexander grabbed Christine by the waist and guided her into the dining room. Before disappearing from my line of sight, he turned and gave me a smile I will never forget. It was the smile of a predator who believes he has caught his prey. Dinner proceeded in an uncomfortable silence that only the two of them seemed to enjoy. Christine talked endlessly about her trips to the Hamptons, her yacht in Nantucket, her luxury apartment on Park Avenue. Lies, all lies. I knew she lived in a shared apartment in Astoria, Queens, and her yacht was a rented sailboat she used 3 times a year. "You know, Isabella," Christine said, dipping a piece of bread into the chicken gravy, "Alexander has told me so much about you. He says you're very homey." "Yes, I am," I replied, cutting a piece of chicken I had no intention of eating. "Homey. And that you have a special knack for keeping everything running," she continued, staring at me with those artificial green eyes. "The house, the bills, the social commitments. You're like a secretary, but without a salary." Alexander laughed. A fake, guttural laugh that echoed off the dining room walls like the sound of betrayal. "Don't be mean, Christine," he said, though his tone indicated the exact opposite. "Isabella is much more than a secretary. She's the mother of my child." He pronounced those words like someone describing a functional piece of furniture. As if my pregnancy were just another project on his agenda. A checked box on his list of personal achievements. "Ah, yes, the famous heir," Christine said, bringing an olive to her mouth with calculated slowness. "Do you think having a baby will make him stay with you?" I looked at Alexander. I expected to see some flash of humanity, some spark of guilt in his eyes, but I only found an empty void, a desert of indifference. "Honey," he said, addressing me with that word that now sounded like poison. "Why don't you pour yourself some more wine?" "Oh, right, you can't drink." "Because of the baby." "Because of the baby," I repeated, feeling my nails digging into my palms beneath the table. Christine leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table as if she were in her own home. "You know what I think, Isabella? I think you're naive. You think that because you're carrying a child in your womb, Alexander will be yours forever. But let me tell you something. Men like Alexander aren't tied down by children. They're tied down by challenges. And you, sweetie, are anything but a challenge." I stared at her. I could have told her so many things. I could have told her I knew every single one of her lies. That I had proof she was sleeping with other men besides Alexander. That her supposed fortune was a facade, held up by debt and maxed out credit cards. But I said nothing. Alexander stood up, walked around the table, and stood behind Christine, resting his hands on her bare shoulders. She tilted her head back, seeking his lips, and he kissed her right in front of me. A long, wet, deliberate kiss. "See, Isabella," he said when he pulled away. "This is what I feel. This is what I've always felt. You were a mistake, a necessary accident to get what I wanted." "What you wanted?" I asked, my voice steady, unwavering. "Your father was right," he continued, ignoring my question. "He warned me against marrying you. He said you were too good for me, and he was right. You're too good, too submissive, too boring." Christine laughed, a sharp sound that pierced my eardrums. "Did you think giving me a child would make you special?" Alexander said the words, dropping like a tombstone onto the table. "No, Isabella. It doesn't make you special. It makes you vulnerable. And vulnerable women are easy to manipulate." I stood up slowly. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor with a sound that cut through the air. I took my napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on the table. "Dinner is served," I said in a voice I barely recognized as my own. "Help yourselves." "You're leaving?" Alexander asked. There was a note of surprise in his voice, as if he had expected me to stay there, crying, begging, groveling. "I'm retiring," I replied. "I need to rest." "The baby." "Right, the baby," Christine interrupted. "Always the baby. Don't you have any other excuse, Isabella?" I didn't answer. I simply walked toward the stairs, feeling their gazes piercing my back. Every step was a superhuman effort. My legs were shaking. My heart beat so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around, and I didn't give them the pleasure of watching me fall. When I reached our bedroom, the bedroom I had shared with Alexander for 3 years, I closed the door carefully without making a sound. I leaned against the heavy mahogany wood and let out the breath I had been holding since I saw them walk in. The tears came without warning. Thick, hot, and silent. They slid down my cheeks as my hands fumbled for the light switch. The room lit up, revealing the bed I had made that morning, the curtains I had washed over the weekend, our wedding photo on the nightstand, a photo that lied. I crossed the room to the closet, not the main one, but the small built-in closet next to the master bathroom. There, behind a stack of old towels, was a wall safe. No one knew it existed. Not even Alexander, who bragged about knowing every corner of this house. I punched in the combination 02141952, my father's birth date. The only person in the world who always knew who I really was. The heavy steel door clicked open. Inside were folders, documents, USB drives, and a burner phone I only used for one thing. I took the phone and dialed the only number saved in its memory. "Harrison," I said, when I heard the voice on the other end. "It's Isabella. The time has come." There was a pause. Then came the serious, professional voice of Harrison Vance, my family's lawyer since before I was born. "Are you sure, Isabella? Once I activate the protocol, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," I replied, wiping my tears with the back of my hand. "I want you to execute the emergency protocol to revoke his access to the joint and corporate accounts. I've already locked him out of our internal systems. And prepare to file an immediate emergency injunction tomorrow morning on his personal and offshore accounts. His mother's accounts, too. Especially his mother's. Patricia has lived very comfortably off money that doesn't belong to her." Another pause. I could imagine Harrison nodding, taking notes in his black leather journal, the one he never went anywhere without. "I need you to confirm one thing, Isabella," he said. "Are you prepared for the fallout? Alexander won't go down without a fight. He'll try to destroy you." I smiled. A bitter smile no one saw. Let him try Harrison. But to destroy me, he would first have to know who I really am. And that day, my dear lawyer is closer than he thinks. I hung up the phone and placed it back in the safe alongside the documents. Before closing it, my fingers brushed against an old, folded, yellowing photograph. I pulled it out carefully. It was a picture of my grandmother, Eleanor Sinclair, the founder of the empire that now bore her name. She was standing in front of the company's first office wearing a navy blue tailored suit, bearing an expression of fierce determination that I had genetically inherited. "Oh, Grandma," I whispered, "you warned me so much about men like him. And you were so right." From downstairs came the sound of laughter. Alexander and Christine celebrating their imaginary victory. They didn't know they were dancing on a minefield, and I was holding the detonator. 10 minutes later, Alexander's phone began to ring. I heard it through the floorboards. First one chime, then another, then an avalanche of notifications that seemed to never end. The laughter stopped. Silence fell. Then came the screaming. "What do you mean my access is revoked?" Alexander's voice cut through the walls like a knife. "All of them can't be locked. Check again." More shouting. the sound of something shattering against the hardwood floor. Probably the porcelain soup tureen my mother gifted us for our wedding. What do you mean the company is under investigation? That's impossible. I am the CEO. CEO. What a funny word. Alexander thought he owned an empire that never belonged to him. He thought he had built a castle on the sand, not knowing that I owned the beach, the ocean, and every grain of sand he walked on. Heavy, fast, desperate footsteps charged up the stairs, pounding on my bedroom door. Isabella, Isabella, open up. I didn't move. I stayed sitting on the edge of the bed with my grandmother's photo in my hands, listening to the king of the hill turn into a beggar. Isabella, please, I need to talk to you. Another louder. Bang. The door rattled. Something's happened. Something terrible. I need your help. My left hand slowly descended to my belly. There, inside me, a new life was growing. A life that would never know her biological father, because her biological father had just dug his own grave. Isabella, his voice was now a raspy sob, barely contained. I beg you. Open the door. I stood up and crossed the room slowly, savoring every step. When I reached the door, I placed my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't turn it. What do you want, Alexander? I asked, my voice serene, almost amused. They've locked my accounts, he said, panic, lacing his breathing. All the company's assets are blocked. They're saying there's a federal investigation for tax fraud. They're saying I'm going to lose everything. Everything, I repeated, tasting the word. Everything. Isabella, I need you to help me. You have access to some accounts, right? The joint ones we opened. You can withdraw cash. We can run. We can. What? Alexander, I interrupted. Run. Like cowards. Silence. Then his voice dropped, turning low and dangerous. Isabella, open the door. Right now. Open the fucking door. He slammed his fist against the wood so hard the frame creaked, but it didn't give. This house was mine. Every brick, every screw, every door. And no door would open without my permission. Alexander, I said, leaning my forehead against the wood. Do you remember what you told me a few minutes ago? That having a child didn't make me special? Silence. Well, let me tell you something. Having a child doesn't make me special. But being Isabella Sinclair, the sole heiress to the Sinclair Group, the corporate empire, your little firm only dreams of working for. Now that makes me special. What? What are you talking about? I smiled. A smile that lit up the entire room. What I'm saying, dear husband, is that you never owned anything. The company, the accounts, the properties, everything is managed by the Sinclair Family Trust. And I am the sole beneficiary. You were just an employee with a fancy title sponsored by the trust, and I just revoked it. That's a lie, he screamed, his voice cracking. I built everything I worked to get it all. You worked, I repeated. Yes, you worked. You worked for me. And now, your employment is terminated. I turned the knob and pulled the door open. Alexander was there on his knees, his face pale and distorted, his eyes red, his hands shaking. Behind him, at the top of the stairs, Christine watched the scene with an expression of pure disbelief and terror. Isabella, he begged, reaching his hands out toward me. Please, whatever you want. I'll give you whatever you want. Give me, I laughed. A cold, calculated laugh. What could you possibly give me, Alexander? You have nothing. You've never had anything. I took a step forward, forcing him to look me in the eyes. Tomorrow you will receive the divorce papers. You will sign everything put in front of you. And if you cause a single problem, I will publicly release all the evidence of your fraud, your infidelities, and your little plans to get rid of me after the baby is born. His eyes widened in sheer horror. How? How do you know that I know a lot of things, Alexander? I know you planned to fake my death in a car accident. I know you hired a man to track my movements. I know you opened a Swiss bank account with money stolen from the company. That's not true, he stammered. I never. Do you want me to show you the bank statements, I asked, pulling my phone from my pocket? Or would you rather discuss the life insurance policy you took out in my name without telling me, all color drained from his face? He looked white as a ghost, like the corpse he always wanted me to be. Isabella, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, I said, pushing past him. Nobody knows who I really am. And it's better that way. I started down the stairs but paused when I reached Christine. She was trembling, arms crossed defensively, trying to make herself invisible. As for you, I said, looking her up and down, you can keep him. After all, in a few weeks, he won't even have enough to buy you a cup of coffee. Enjoy your yacht in Nantucket, sweetie. Her face crumbled. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. I walked out the front door without looking back. The crisp night air hit my face. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. As I walked toward the waiting car, a black Cadillac Escalade driven by Marcus, my head of security, my phone vibrated. It was a text from Harrison. Protocol activated. Access revoked. Injunctions prepared for morning. Federal investigation underway. Next step, I smiled and typed my reply with steady fingers. Prepare the press conference. Tomorrow at 10 a.m., I'm going to tell the world who I really am. I put my phone away and leaned back into the plush leather of the back seat, placing a hand over my belly. Did you hear that, little one? I whispered. Mommy is going to show the world what it means to be a Sinclair. The SUV pulled away, leaving behind the house, the lies, and the man who thought he could destroy me. But this wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The black Escalade glided through the streets of Manhattan at a speed that defied the limits. Marcus kept his eyes fixed on the road while I watched the city lights blur past the window. Every street lamp, every traffic light, every illuminated skyscraper reminded me that this was my city. It always had been. Alexander just never knew it. Where to, miss? Isabella, Marcus asked without taking his eyes off the asphalt. To the Park Avenue penthouse, the one under Sinclair Investments. Marcus nodded. He knew exactly which one I meant. He had worked for my family since he was 20 years old and knew every property, every shell corporation, every secret of the empire my grandmother built. The ride took barely 15 minutes. When the SUV stopped in front of the most iconic building on Park Avenue, I stepped out without waiting for Marcus to open the door. The doorman, an older gentleman in an impeccable uniform, recognized me instantly. Miss Sinclair, he said, giving a slight bow. We haven't seen you around here in quite some time. Good evening, Albert. It has been a while. I crossed the white marble lobby, while Albert called the private elevator. The walls were decorated with contemporary art my mother had collected over the years. Everything in this building spoke of old money, the kind of money that doesn't need to show off because it is evident in every detail. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside. Marcus stayed behind to guard the entrance. Always the professional. The doors closed and the elevator began its ascent. 20 floors, 20 seconds of silence in which my mind reviewed every detail of what I was about to do. The penthouse was exactly as I remembered it. Over 3,000 square feet of pure, discreet luxury. Oak hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the skyline. Italian designer furniture my grandmother had personally selected before she passed away. Everything was spotless, as if someone had been cleaning regularly, just waiting for my return. I dropped my purse on the coffee table and walked toward the glass. New York stretched out before me like a chessboard, and I was about to move my pieces. My phone rang. Harrison. Did you arrive safely? He asked, his voice laced with a rare hint of concern. Yes, I'm at the penthouse. What do you have for me? A lot, Isabella. More than you imagined. Tell me. Harrison cleared his throat. I could picture him sitting in his Madison Avenue corner office, surrounded by stacks of legal briefs that black journal open in front of him. I've audited all of Alexander's financial movements over the last 5 years. The legal ones and the not-so-legal ones. And I have to say your instincts were dead on. What did you find? Let's start with the basics. Alexander has been siphoning funds from the company for at least 3 years. Small amounts at first, then larger sums. In total, approximately $2 million. $2 million, I repeated, feeling the rage begin to bubble in my chest. That's not all. He's also been using shell companies to launder money. Corporations registered in Panama, the Virgin Islands, the Caymans. Very well structured, but not enough to fool a good forensic accountant. And the joint portals you locked him out of, they're secure. But he has a secret account in Switzerland at Credit Suisse with a balance of $800,000. The account is solely in his name. I gritted my teeth. $800,000. Money we had earned together. Or rather, money I had earned and he had stolen. Can you access that account? Already have, Harrison said, pride bleeding into his tone. Turns out the branch director is an old college buddy. When I showed him the proof of illicit funds, he triggered their internal compliance protocol. The account is frozen pending an international investigation. Alexander won't be able to touch a single cent in Switzerland. I smiled, a smile that held nothing sweet. Good. Anything else? Yes. I found something that might interest you even more. Tell me. Alexander hasn't just been unfaithful with Christine. He's had at least 4 other mistresses in the last 2 years. Young women, mostly company employees. He paid for trips, gifts, apartments, all with company money. I closed my eyes. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it hurt. It hurt knowing that while I was at home preparing dinner, ironing his shirts, taking care of his household, he was dividing our future among strangers. Keep all the evidence, I said, my voice colder than I intended. I'll need it for the divorce. I already have it organized. Testimonies, photographs, bank statements, hotel logs, everything. Thank you, Harrison. You're the best. Just doing my job, Isabella. And it is my distinct pleasure to watch that asshole get exactly what he deserves. I hung up and stared out at the horizon. The city lights blinked like fallen stars. And it's somewhere in this concrete jungle, Alexander was wallowing in his own misery, wondering where it all went wrong. But this was only the beginning. I spent the next 2 hours reviewing documents. Harrison had emailed me a complete dossier, financial balances, private investigator reports, wiretapped conversations, recovered WhatsApp messages. Everything I needed to destroy Alexander in a courtroom. But I didn't want to destroy him in a courtroom. I wanted something else. I wanted him to suffer. To experience every ounce of humiliation he had made me feel for years. My phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed a name I wasn't expecting. Dad. Isabella, the voice of Richard Sinclair, sounded grave on the other end of the line. Word has reached me about what you've done. What exactly has reached you? That you revoked Alexander's access? That you initiated a federal fraud investigation? That you moved out of the house? I sighed. My father had always been a man of few words, but when he spoke, every word carried the weight of a boulder. Yes, all of that is true. Why didn't you consult me first? Because I don't need your permission to make decisions about my life, Dad. There was a heavy silence. Then my father sighed. I knew that sound well. It was the sigh of resignation, the same one he used when he knew he wasn't going to win an argument. I never said you needed my permission. I'm just saying you could have given me a heads up. I'm your father, Isabella. I worry about you. I know, Dad, and I appreciate your concern, but I had to do this alone. Are you sure about what you're doing? Alexander is not an easy man. He has contacts. He has influence. So do I, Dad. And mine are better. Another silence. Then a brief, almost imperceptible chuckle. You always were exactly like your grandmother. Stubborn, proud, and with a thirst for vengeance that's downright terrifying. Thanks, Dad. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. Your grandmother built this empire from nothing. If there's anyone who can teach you how to handle a man like Alexander, it's her. That's why her picture is on my nightstand. All right. So tell me, what's your next move? I looked down at the documents scattered across the glass table. My hand instinctively moved to my belly where my daughter was growing, completely ignorant of the chaos her mother was unleashing. Tomorrow, I'm giving a press conference. I'll officially announce that I am assuming control of the Sinclair Group. Then I'll initiate the divorce proceedings. And the baby. The baby will be mine. Exclusively. Mine. Alexander will have absolutely no rights to her. Are you sure you want to raise her alone? I won't be alone, Dad. I have you, Mom Harrison Marcus. And I have a fortune that allows me to give her everything she needs. More than a fortune, Isabella. You have a legacy. And it's time you claimed it. I hung up the phone and stood in silence for a few minutes. My father's words echoed in my head. A legacy. That was what my grandmother had left me. A financial empire she built in an era when women couldn't even open a bank account without their husband's permission. My grandmother Eleanor Sinclair had arrived in New York from a poor coal mining town in West Virginia at the age of 15, with nothing but a bundle of clothes. She worked as a seamstress, a maid, a cook, until one day at 25, with a loan nobody wanted to give her, she bought a small textile workshop. 50 years later. That workshop had evolved into the Sinclair Group, a holding company with massive interests in real estate, hospitality, energy, and tech. My grandmother died when I was 12, but before she left, she taught me everything she knew. Never trust a man who promises you the world, Isabella, she told me one afternoon as we walked through the gardens of her estate in upstate New York. The men who promise you the world are usually the exact same ones who will take it from you. But Dad isn't like that, I had protested with the sheer naivety of a 12-year-old. Your father is an exception, but the exceptions only prove the rule. When you grow up, choose a man who respects you, not one who worships you. Adoration fades. Respect does not. I didn't follow her advice. I chose Alexander because he made me feel special. Because he promised me a bright future. Because he told me we were soulmates. And now, 5 years later, I was paying the price for my blindness. The next morning, I woke up in the penthouse bed. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, bathing the room in a golden glow. I sat up, stretched my arms, and felt the weight of my belly. My daughter shifted inside me as if she knew today was an important day. I ate a light breakfast, orange juice, whole wheat toast yogurt, no coffee for the baby's sake. As I ate, I checked my phone. Dozens of messages, mostly from unknown numbers. Journalists. I figured the news of Alexander's blocked accounts had spread like wildfire. One message caught my attention. It was from Christine. "Isabella, please, I need to talk to you. It's important." I read it twice. What could Christine possibly want from me? Hadn't she had enough humiliation the night before I deleted the text without replying? I didn't have time for games. At 9:30 a.m., Marcus picked me up at the front of the building. This time he wasn't driving the Escalade, but an armored Audi my father had placed at my disposal. I climbed into the back seat as Marcus merged into the traffic heading toward the Sinclair Group headquarters on 5th Avenue. "Miss," Isabella, Marcus said, keeping his eyes on the road. I received intel that Alexander was making calls all night. He reached out to several lawyers, some politicians, even a couple of journalists. Nobody wanted to help him. Once they found out the Sinclair Group was behind the operation, everyone backed off. I smiled. The power of my last name was stronger than Alexander had ever imagined. Any other news? Yes. Christine has been calling the office. She says she has important information she wants to share with you. She texted me last night. I ignored her. "You might want to listen to her," Marcus said, a note of caution in his tone. "People like Christine, when backed into a corner, can be useful. I'll keep it in mind." The Sinclair Group headquarters was an imposing 50-story glass and steel skyscraper that reflected the blue New York sky. When the car stopped in front of the entrance, a mob of journalists was already waiting. Cameras, microphones, flashes, the entire media circus I had anticipated. Marcus opened the door and I stepped out. The press surged toward me, but the security team instantly formed a barricade around me, keeping them at bay. "Miss Sinclair," a reporter shouted. "Is it true you've blocked your husband's corporate access, Isabella?" Another yelled. "Can you confirm you're separating from Alexander? Give us a statement." I walked without stopping, my gaze fixed straight ahead until I reached the glass doors of the building. I turned briefly to face the press. "There will be a press conference at 10:00 a.m., I said, my voice firm and authoritative. "I will answer all your questions then." I walked into the lobby as the reporters chanted my name. The lobby was vast, luminous, decorated with the exquisite taste only generational wealth can afford. At the reception desk, a young woman in a gray suit greeted me with a deferential nod. "Miss Sinclair, they are waiting for you on the 50th floor. Thank you." I took the executive elevator, the same one my father used. As I rode up, I took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves beginning to surface. It wasn't fear. It was anticipation. The boardroom on the 50th floor was a sprawling space, anchored by a massive mahogany table that could seat 20 people. My father, Harrison, Vance, and 3 other board members were waiting. They all stood up when I entered. "Isabella," my father said, walking over to kiss my cheek. "You look radiant." "Thank you, Dad. Are you ready?" "More than ever." Harrison approached with a folder in his hand. "Here's the speech. But if you want to improvise, go ahead. You have my full support." I took the folder, but I didn't open it. I didn't need a written script. The words would flow on their own. At 10:00 a.m. sharp, I walked into the press room. It was packed to the brim. Journalists from every major outlet in the country, TV cameras, photographers, all waiting for my words. I stepped up to the podium and adjusted the microphone. I looked out at the audience, seeing their expectant faces, their curious eyes. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with skepticism. But they were all there for one reason. They wanted to know who Isabella Sinclair really was. "Good morning," I began, my voice ringing out clear and steady. "Thank you all for coming." A murmur rippled through the room. The cameras zoomed in on my face. "I am Isabella Sinclair, sole beneficiary of the Sinclair Family Trust, and until yesterday, the wife of Alexander Montgomery." Absolute silence. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. I have called this press conference to make several announcements. First, I have officially assumed control of the Sinclair Group as CEO, succeeding my father, Richard Sinclair, who has decided to retire after 40 years at the helm of this company. Applause broke out. Several journalists started typing frantically on their phones and laptops. Second, I have initiated divorce proceedings against Alexander Montgomery due to causes that will be fully exposed in the appropriate legal venue. More murmurs. A journalist raised her hand. "Miss Sinclair, can you explain what led to such a drastic decision?" I looked directly into the camera lenses. I knew Alexander would be watching this somewhere. Maybe on the flat screen in our old living room, or perhaps on his phone wallowing in his own despair. I prefer not to go into details here, I replied, but I can tell you that the evidence of infidelity, embezzlement of corporate funds, and attempted federal fraud is currently in the hands of my legal team. Mr. Montgomery will have the opportunity to defend himself in a court of law. The room erupted. Everyone was shouting questions at once, trying to grab my attention. But I had said what I needed to say. That is all for now, I concluded. My attorneys will provide further information as the legal process moves forward. Thank you for your time. I stepped away from the podium as the press continued shouting questions. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked out of the press room with my head held high, feeling the weight of years of silence lifting off my shoulders. In the hallway, my father was waiting with a proud smile. You did brilliantly, sweetheart. Thanks, Dad. And now what? Now, we win the war. Just then, my phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it and read, I know where he hid the money. Meet me at the Central Cafe at 6 p.m. Come alone, Christine. I looked up and smiled. It seemed the war had just gained a new ally. The Central Cafe was nearly empty at 6:00 p.m., save for a few occupied tables where patrons perused newspapers or spoke in hushed voices. I ordered a chamomile tea and sat at a booth tucked far away from the front window with my back flush against the wall. An old habit my grandmother taught me, never sit with your back to the door. You never know who might walk in. Christine arrived 10 minutes late. She was wearing a black turtleneck sweater and tight jeans. Without a drop of makeup, she looked younger, more vulnerable, more human than she had the night before. She sat across from me without asking for permission, without greeting me. Her eyes were swollen and her hands trembled atop the table. Thanks for coming, she said, her voice raspy, as if she'd been crying for hours. I didn't come for you, I replied, taking a sip of my tea. I came for the information you claim to have. Christine nodded, swallowed hard, and reached into her oversized tote bag. She pulled out a thick manila envelope sealed with packing tape. She placed it on the table and slid it toward me. Everything you need to bury him is in there. Bank statements, passwords, locations of offshore accounts, names of his shell company proxies, everything. I didn't touch the envelope. I just looked at it, then at her. Why are you doing this? 24 hours ago, you were in my house, laughing at me while making out with my husband. Christine looked down. Her fingers fidgeted nervously with the edge of the table. Because I'm a survivor, Isabella. And survivors know when to switch sides. Explain. She took a deep breath. When she looked up, her eyes held a gleam I hadn't seen before. It wasn't regret. It was rage. I met Alexander 2 years ago. I worked at a marketing agency he hired for a project. At first, he was charming, attentive, generous. He took me to nice dinners, bought me gifts, promised me a future together. I was young, naive, and I needed the money. My mother had cancer. She needed an experimental treatment, and I couldn't afford it. And he knew. He knew everything. From day one, he weaponized my desperation to control me. He told me that if I did what he wanted, he would pay for my mother's treatment. And I accepted. I became his mistress, his escort, his walking lie. And your mother died 6 months ago. Alexander stopped paying for the treatments the second he got tired of me. He said I was no longer useful, that he'd found someone else. I felt a knot form in my stomach. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. I, too, had been a tool for Alexander. A useful object to be discarded the moment it ceased to serve its purpose. So why now, I asked. Why betray him now? Because yesterday when I saw him begging on his knees to you, I realized something I had never wanted to see. Alexander doesn't love anyone. He doesn't love women. He doesn't love his business partners. He doesn't love anyone but himself. And men like that deserve to fall. I took the envelope and opened it. Inside were documents, flash drives, photographs. Everything meticulously organized, labeled, dated. Christine had been gathering evidence for months, maybe years. Why do you trust me? I asked, looking up from the papers. I could be working with him. Because if you were working with him, you wouldn't have locked his accounts. You wouldn't have held a press conference. And you wouldn't be sitting across from me listening to what I have to say. That doesn't answer my question. Christine smiled. A sad, tired smile that didn't reach her eyes. I trust you, because you are a woman he tried to destroy. And women who have survived men like Alexander share a bond they will never understand. I put the envelope in my bag and signaled the waiter for the check. Christine hadn't ordered anything, but I paid for my tea and left a generous tip. As I stood up to leave, she reached out and touched my arm. Isabella, one more thing. Tell me. Alexander is not going to surrender. Tonight, he has a meeting with a silent partner who doesn't appear on any official registry. A guy named Silas Thorne. He's a private investor with deep ties to the underworld and corrupt politicians. Alexander thinks Thorne can help him regain control of the company. And what do you think? I think Thorne is far more dangerous than Alexander. I've heard rumors about him. Dirty deals, extortion, disappearances. If Alexander allies with him, things are going to get very ugly. I made a mental note of the name. Silas Thorne. I'd have to look into him. Thank you, Christine, for everything. Don't thank me yet. Once Alexander finds out I gave you this, he'll come for me. I need to disappear for a while. Where will you go? I have a flight to London tonight. A friend there is taking me in. Good luck. You too, Isabella. You're going to need it. More than you think. I walked out of the cafe and climbed into the back of the SUV where Marcus was waiting. I handed him the envelope without a word. He placed it in the glove compartment and started the engine. Home, he asked. No, to Harrison's office on Madison. We have work to do. During the ride. I mentally reviewed the information Christine had given me. If it was true, I held the key to destroying Alexander completely. But I had also opened a door to a much darker world, one I might not be able to escape so easily. Harrison Vance's office was located on Madison Avenue inside an old building with a stately classic New York facade. I walked up the marble steps while Marcus waited downstairs, ever vigilant. The heavy oak door to Harrison's suite was ajar, and his voice leaked through the crack. No, Mr. Thorne, I cannot accept that offer. My client has very clear instructions regarding this matter. Thorne. The name Christine had just given me. I stopped in the threshold listening. I understand your position, counselor. A deep, authoritative male voice replied over the speakerphone. But perhaps your client is unaware of the consequences of her actions. It would be a damn shame if something were to happen to a pregnant woman. My blood boiled. I pushed the door open and walked in. Harrison was sitting behind his massive desk phone and hand tension radiating from his face. When he saw me, his eyes widened slightly. Mr. Thorne, I have to let you go. My client just walked in. I'll return your call later. Harrison hung up without waiting for a response. He stood and walked around the desk to greet me. Isabella, I wasn't expecting you so soon. I had a very interesting conversation with Christine, and it seems you've been busy as well. Harrison nodded, gesturing toward one of the leather guest chairs. I sat down, placing my bag on my lap. That was Silas Thorne, Harrison said, returning to his seat. He wants to sit down with you. For what he's offering a negotiated exit. Says he can convince Alexander to sign the divorce papers without a fight in exchange for financial compensation. And what do you think? I think it's a trap. Thorne isn't known for his negotiation skills. He's known for resolving problems. Permanently. Then I won't meet with him. You can't avoid him forever, Isabella. If you don't accept the meeting, he'll find another way to get to you. Better to control the playing field. I thought about it for a few seconds. Harrison was right. If Thorne wanted to see me, he would. The question was on whose terms. Set up the meeting, I said, but on neutral ground, and I want Marcus in the room. I'll arrange it. But Isabella, be careful. Thorne isn't like Alexander. He's a man entirely without scruples. I don't have scruples either, Harrison. I only have objectives. We spent the next few hours tearing through Christine's documents. The intel was pure gold. Accounts in tax havens, illegal wire transfers, bribes paid to city officials. Alexander had woven a web of corruption that spanned half the East Coast. With this, Harrison said, tapping a specific ledger, we can send him to federal prison for decades. I don't want to send him to prison, I replied. I want him to suffer. I want him to lose everything he thinks he has. I want him crawling. That's harder. The law doesn't always punish the guilty the way they deserve. Then we'll use other tools. Harrison looked at me curiously. What do you have in mind? First, I want you to leak the information about his Swiss accounts to the press. I want the whole world to know Alexander Montgomery is a thief. And after that, I want you to contact his business partners, one by one. Make it crystal clear that any relationship with Alexander means the immediate severing of all ties with the Sinclair Group. That's a declaration of war. The war has already started, Harrison. I'm just deciding how to end it. At 9:00 p.m., my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I let it ring, but when it started ringing a second time, I decided to answer. Speak, Miss Sinclair. The voice was male, deep with an accent I couldn't quite place. I hear you've had a very productive day. Depends on what you call productive, mister. Thorne, obtaining valuable intel from an unreliable source. Christine has always been a woman of shifting loyalties. My heart skipped a beat. How did he know about Christine? He had been following us. I don't know what you're talking about, I lied. Of course you do, Miss Sinclair. But don't worry. I didn't call to threaten you. On the contrary, I want to propose a deal. What kind of deal? You have something I want. Control of the Sinclair Group. I have something you want. Peace. I think we can help each other. I don't need your help, Mr. Thorne. Are you sure? Because I hear Alexander is willing to do whatever it takes to get back what he believes is his. And when a desperate man allies himself with dangerous people, things can go south very quickly. Are you referring to yourself? Thorne laughed. A cold, calculated sound that chilled me to the bone. I am merely offering you an exit, Miss Sinclair. Take it or leave it. But if you choose to leave it, I cannot guarantee your safety, or the safety of your unborn baby. The explicit threat ignited something deep inside me. It wasn't fear. It was sheer, unadulterated fury. Listen to me very carefully, Mr. Thorne. I don't know who you are, or what rock you crawled out from under, but I assure you one thing. If you or any of your men come anywhere near me or my daughter, you will deeply regret it. I have resources, I have contacts, and I have zero patience for two-bit mobsters. Silence on the other end. Then another laugh, but this time different, less secure. Interesting. I wasn't expecting that reaction. You are a woman full of surprises, so it seems. Very well, Miss Sinclair. I accept the challenge. But remember, I always win. Everyone says that until they lose. I hung up and set the phone face down on the table. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline. The game had just gotten infinitely more complicated, but also far more interesting. Harrison was watching me from his chair, his expression a mix of awe and dread. You just threatened Silas Thorne. Do you have any idea what that means? It means I just put a price on my own head. Exactly. And Thorne is not a man who forgets threats. Neither am I, Harrison. Neither am I. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. A cheerful, familiar female voice picked up. Bella, it's been forever. How are you? I need a favor, Chloe. A big one. Name it. I need you to investigate a man. His name is Silas Thorne. I need everything you can find. Businesses, contacts, weaknesses. What kind of businesses? Dirty. Very dirty. There was a pause. Chloe's tone shifted to full investigative journalist mode. Are you in some kind of trouble? Bella, I'm in a war, Chloe, and I need to win it. Do you understand? Give me 48 hours. Thank you. I owe you one. You'll pay me back with a very expensive dinner. And the exclusive scoop on this war. I hung up and turned back to Harrison. Chloe works investigative pieces for the Times. If anyone can dig up dirt on Thorne, it's her. And if she doesn't find anything, we'll just have to create our own leverage. That night, when I finally returned to the penthouse, I collapsed onto the sofa, phone in hand. I had received dozens of texts, but one stood out. It was from Alexander. Isabella, please. I need to see you. We can resolve this like adults. I promise I didn't know what I was doing. Christine manipulated me. It's all her fault. I smiled bitterly. Always the same song. It was never his fault. There was always someone else to point the finger at. I replied with a single text. Guilt belongs to the guilty Alexander, and you have plenty of it. I turned off my phone and lay down in bed, resting a hand on my belly. My daughter moved inside me as if she knew her mother was fighting a battle that would determine her entire future. Don't worry, little one, I whispered into the dark. Mommy is going to win this war. I promise. The next morning, I was violently awakened by the ringing of my phone. It was 7:30 a.m. Dawn light bled through the blinds, painting the room in strokes of orange and gold. Speak, Miss Sinclair. It was Marcus's voice. Tense, urgent. We have a problem. What happened? They found Christine in an alley near her office in Midtown. She's dead. The world stopped spinning for a split second. The air froze in my lungs. House stabbed multiple times. NYPD is processing the scene. Are there suspects? Not officially. But we all know who's behind this. I squeezed my eyes shut. Christine had died for helping me, for giving me the leverage I needed to destroy Alexander. And now her blood was on my hands. Marcus, I want you to double security. Hire more men. Nobody gets near me without your explicit authorization. Already done, ma'am. I've also dispatched a detail to your father's estate and corporate headquarters. Good. Now come pick me up and take me to Harrison's office. We need to move the timeline up. What timeline? The plan to finish Alexander Montgomery and Silas Thorne. There's no time left for half measures. I hung up and sat on the edge of the bed, staring straight ahead. Christine was dead, but her information lived on, and I was going to use it to ensure she didn't die in vain. At Harrison's office, the air was suffocatingly thick. Harrison was pacing, speaking in hushed tones on his cell phone with a contact in the NYPD. When he hung up, his face was a mask of gravity. "The police have a person of interest," he said. "A guy with a rap sheet linked to Thorne. But they don't have enough physical evidence to hold him. And what do we do in the meantime? We wait and prepare." "I'm not waiting, Harrison. I'm attacking." "Attack how?" I pulled Christine's envelope from my bag and slammed it onto the mahogany desk. "This intel is worth more than any police evidence. If we leak this to the press right now, Alexander is utterly destroyed. And without Alexander, Thorne loses his main asset. If we leak this now, we expose ourselves to immediate retaliation. The retaliation has already started. Christine is dead. How long do you think it'll be before they come for me?" Harrison stared at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "All right, let's do it." At 3:00 p.m. that afternoon, every major digital news outlet blasted the exact same headline: "Alexander Montgomery husband to Sinclair Group heiress, implicated in massive federal fraud and money laundering ring." Christine's documents were embedded in every article: bank statements, wire transfers, shell company names. Everything was out there exposed for the world to see. Harrison's phone didn't stop ringing the entire afternoon. Journalists, lawyers, Wall Street investors, everyone wanted to know more. Everyone wanted to pick a side. At 6:00 p.m., I received a call from my father. "You did it," he said, pride swelling his voice. "You planted the bomb. Now we just wait for it to detonate. Be careful, Isabella. Wounded animals are the most dangerous. I know, Dad, but experienced hunters know exactly how to put them out of their misery." I hung up and looked out the window. New York City sprawled beneath me, entirely indifferent to the storm brewing above it. But I wasn't indifferent. I was the storm, and I was just getting started. The news of Christine's murder dominated the headlines for exactly 24 hours. Then, as always happens in this city, the media circus moved on to the next scandal, the next tragedy, the next corpse to feed the masses. But I didn't forget. I couldn't forget. Harrison had ordered the installation of a state-of-the-art security system at the penthouse that turned the place into an impenetrable fortress. Marcus slept on the living room sofa, with a Glock under a throw pillow, his ears tuned to the slightest anomaly. I barely slept. Every shadow, every creak in the floorboards. Every silence that stretched a second too long put me on high alert. At 3:00 a.m. on the third night after Christine's death, my phone rang. The caller ID was restricted. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, I answered. "Miss Sinclair." The voice was female, young, trembling. "I'm Lucy, Christine's sister." I sat bolt upright in bed, resting my back against the headboard. "Lucy, I'm so sorry about your sister. I didn't call for condolences. I called because you need to know the truth." "What truth?" "Christine didn't go to London. She never had a plane ticket. That night after she met with you, she went back to her apartment, and they were waiting for her." A cold shiver raced down my spine. "How do you know that?" "Because I was with her when she got there. She asked me to come over. She was terrified. She said she had done something that was going to make very dangerous people come after her." "What did you two do?" "We hid. For 2 hours, we hid in the basement storage unit of her building while 2 men trashed her apartment. When they finally left, Christine told me she had to go get some documents she left at her office. She told me to wait in the apartment, but she never came back." I closed my eyes. Christine had died because of the documents currently in my possession. The documents I used to nuke Alexander's life. "Lucy, I'm so sorry." "I don't want you to be sorry. I want you to finish what my sister started. She wanted Alexander to pay for all the damage he caused, and you're the only one who can make that happen. I will. I promise you. One more thing. Before she died, Christine gave me something for you. She said if anything happened to her, I needed to make sure you got it." "What is it?" "An audio recording. A conversation between Alexander and that guy, Silas Thorne. They're talking about you. About how they're going to get rid of you right after the baby is born." The oxygen left the room. "Where are you right now?" "At a payphone near Central Park." "I'm scared, Miss Sinclair. They know Christine talked to me. They might be looking for me." "Listen to me, Lucy. I want you to walk straight into the NYPD 17th Precinct. Ask for Detective Miller. Tell him you're there on my behalf and he will protect you. Keep that recording safe. Do not hand it over to anyone but me. I'll come get it in the morning. Okay. Thank you, Miss Sinclair. Don't thank me. Just help me keep the promise I made to your sister. I hung up the phone and stared into the dark void of my bedroom. Alexander and Thorne were actively planning to murder me. It wasn't just a vague threat. It was a plot in motion. And sitting up here in my armored penthouse made me a sitting duck. At first light, I called Harrison. I need you to get me a face-to-face with Silas Thorne. Today, Isabella. That is absolute insanity. Thorne is I know exactly what he is. But I also know he wants to see me. And I want to look him in the eye. For what purpose to negotiate? Negotiate what? Your life. There was a long silence on the line. Harrison exhaled heavily. I'll make some calls. But, Isabella, promise me you won't do anything stupid. I'm not promising anything, Harrison. But I will promise you this. If Thorne tries a single I won't be the only one leaving that room in a body bag. The meeting was set for 8:00 p.m. at an ultra-exclusive discreet restaurant on the Upper East Side. The kind of place where billionaires and power brokers felt perfectly safe conducting business that should never see the light of day. Marcus drove me in the armored Audi. We barely spoke during the ride. He knew I was planning something reckless, but he also knew nothing he said could stop me. The restaurant was called the Olive Branch. It had a nondescript facade, no glowing sign, no ostentatious displays, just a solid mahogany door and a discreet brass buzzer. Marcus parked the SUV 50 yards away and stepped out with me. I'll wait right here, he said. If you're not out in 30 minutes, I'm coming in. 30 minutes is too long. Make it 15. He nodded. I pressed the buzzer and waited. A massive man in a tailored black suit with an earpiece opened the door. Miss Sinclair. Yes, Mr. Thorne is expecting you. Follow me. I followed him down a narrow, dimly lit hallway adorned with classic still life paintings and crystal chandeliers that cast dancing shadows on the flocked wallpaper. At the end of the hall, double doors opened into a private dining room illuminated by the warm glow of a gas fireplace. Silas Thorne sat in a plush leather wingback chair nursing a snifter of scotch. He looked to be in his late 50s, with silver hair, tanned skin, and a smile that categorically failed to reach his eyes. Flanking him were two menacing men standing with their hands clasped behind their backs. Miss Sinclair Thorne said, standing up with calculated slowness, I'm so glad you accepted my invitation. I didn't accept an invitation. I came to make something very clear. By all means, I'm listening. I sat across from him without waiting to be offered a chair. I placed my designer handbag on the table, keeping my right hand inside. My fingers resting on the cold steel of a 9mm Marcus had insisted I carry from his private security armory. I know what you're planning with Alexander. I know you plan to dispose of me after the baby is born. And I know you killed Christine. Thorne's smile didn't falter, but his eyes shifted. They grew harder, colder. Those are very grave accusations, Miss Sinclair. Do you have proof I have a recording? A tape of you and Alexander discussing my murder. The smile finally vanished. Thorne set his glass down on the table and leaned forward. That recording does not exist. It does. And it is currently in the hands of someone I implicitly trust. If anything happens to me, it goes public. And with it, every single connection between you and Alexander, all your offshore accounts and your list of bought politicians. Thorne stared at me for what felt like an eternity. The silence stretched until the air grew thin, then let out a dry, humorless chuckle. You are much smarter than you appear, Miss Sinclair, but you're making one fatal mistake, which is, do you really think you can walk into this room, threaten me, and walk out unscathed? I haven't threatened you. I've informed you. There's a profound difference. Thorne stood up and walked over to the fireplace, slipping his hands into his pockets. He stared at the flames for a moment before turning back to face me. I have a counter-proposal. I'm listening. Alexander owes me a vast sum of money. Capital I invested into his little firm, money that is now frozen because of your crusade. I want you to reimburse me for that investment. In exchange, I will vanish from your life. How much? $5 million. No. Thorne raised an eyebrow. No, I won't pay you a single cent. You chose to invest in Alexander, not in me. Your bad investment is your problem, Mr. Thorne. I don't think you realize who you are talking to. I am perfectly aware. You are a criminal, a thug in an expensive suit with political connections. But you are also a businessman. And businessmen understand one fundamental concept, cutting your losses. Alexander is ruined. He has no money to pay you back, and I am certainly not covering his debts. So you have two options. You accept the loss and walk away, or you push forward and you face the consequences. And what exactly would those consequences be? I pulled my hand out of my bag. Empty. I didn't need a gun to intimidate Silas Thorne. I had something far deadlier. Information. I know about your operations with the narcotics syndicates out of Miami. I know about your contacts with the Colombian cartels. I know about the shadow accounts in the Cayman Islands where you hide the cash you don't report to the IRS. If anything happens to me, every ounce of that intel goes straight to the FBI, the New York Times, and your rival partners. And then Mr. Thorne. I won't be the one looking over my shoulder. Thorne's face cracked. For the first time since I entered the room, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. How did you get that information? I have friends in high places. And I have resources you can't even begin to fathom. Thorne took a step toward me. The men in black shifted, but Thorne held up a hand, stopping them. This isn't over, Miss Sinclair. It's already over. You back off, you leave Alexander to his fate, and I forget you exist. If I ever hear from you again, everything goes public. Do we have a deal? Thorne clenched his jaw. His hands balled into tight fists at his sides. For a split second, I thought he was going to order his men to kill me. But then he turned around and sat back down in his leather chair. We have a deal, he said, each word sounding like it cost him physical pain. I'm glad we could reach an understanding. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and headed for the door. Before stepping out, I turned back. Oh, one more thing, Mr. Thorne. If I hear that you so much as breathe in the direction of Lucy Christine's sister, the deal is off. And there won't be a corner of this earth dark enough for you to hide. I walked out without waiting for a reply. I marched down the hallway, pushed through the heavy wooden door, and inhaled the crisp New York night. Marcus was standing by the SUV, his hand resting inside his jacket. Everything all right? He asked. Perfect, I said, climbing into the back. Take me to Harrison's office. We have to prepare the final move. Harrison was waiting for me with a bottle of Napa Cabernet and a grin I hadn't seen in days. I hear your sit-down with Thorne was productive. Productive is an understatement. I made it very clear who's running the show. That's great. But don't forget Alexander is still the primary problem. Not for much longer. I took out my phone and dialed Alexander's number. He answered on the second ring. Isabella. His voice was hoarse, desperate. Finally. I've been trying to reach you for days. I know. I've been busy. I saw the news. I saw the leaked documents. How did you get all that? It doesn't matter. What matters is that you have 24 hours to sign the divorce papers and relinquish any and all rights to the company and the baby. And if I don't, then I release the audio recordings of your conversations with Thorne, the ones where you plan my murder. Silence. Then his voice shaking. You don't have those tapes. I do. Christine was very meticulous. She kept backups of everything. Christine is dead. I know. I know exactly who killed her, and I have the proof that implicates you directly. Another longer silence. When Alexander finally spoke, his voice was a mere whisper. What do you want, Isabella? The same thing I've always wanted. For you to disappear from my life, sign the papers, accept the divorce, and go far, far away. And if I refuse, then you will spend the rest of your life in a federal penitentiary, knowing that your own child will grow up despising your memory. You can't do this. I'm the father of your child. You're a sperm donor. Nothing more. And if you don't sign, I promise you will regret it. I hung up without waiting for an answer. My hands were shaking not from fear but from the years of suppressed rage finally finding an outlet. Harrison poured me a glass of wine. Even though I couldn't drink it, I held it in my hands, letting the warmth of the glass ground me. Do you think he'll sign? Harrison asked. He'll sign. He doesn't have a choice. And then, I start building my life. A life without lies, without betrayals, without fear. Alexander signed the papers the very next day. His attorney delivered them in person to Harrison's office, along with a handwritten letter that I didn't even bother to read. Harrison tore it to shreds in front of the lawyer, a symbolic gesture that the darkest chapter of my life had closed. I kept my word. I didn't release the audio of him plotting my murder to the press. But the federal investigation Harrison had triggered couldn't be stopped. A month later, the FBI caught Alexander trying to flee across the Canadian border with a fake passport. He was remanded into federal custody without bail, awaiting trial on dozens of felony charges. But I knew it wasn't over. Not completely. There was still one loose end. 3 days later, I got a call from the 17th Precinct. Detective Miller wanted to see me. I went down with Marcus, who waited in the SUV while I walked into the station. Detective Miller was a man in his early 60s, with silver hair and tired eyes that betrayed decades of wearing a badge. He received me in his cramped, messy cubicle cluttered with case files and empty coffee cups. "Miss Sinclair," he said, pointing to a rigid plastic chair. "Thanks for coming. Tell me, detective, I assume you didn't call me here for the coffee?" "No. I called you to let you know we've arrested Silas Thorne." My heart did a flip. How? A parallel investigation. Turns out Thorne had more enemies than friends. Someone leaked a massive cache of data regarding his offshore operations to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. This morning, while trying to board a private jet at JFK, he was taken into federal custody. Who leaked the data? The detective smiled. A knowing, complicit smile. "We don't know, but I have a sneaking suspicion it was someone with immense resources, deep contacts, and a very bad temper." I returned the smile. "Justice is slow, detective, but it arrives. Sometimes it needs a little push." What happens to Thorne now? He's being held without bail. He's facing federal charges for wire fraud, money laundering, and RICO violations. With the evidence that magically appeared, he'll likely die in a federal cell. I'm glad. We have our eyes on you too, Miss Sinclair. The smile dropped from my face. "Me, don't worry. Nothing serious. We just want to ensure everything you've done has been strictly legal. Everything I have done has been to protect myself and my daughter. I know. And that's why I'm not digging any deeper. But be careful. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but it can leave a bitter aftertaste." I stood up and offered my hand. "Thank you, detective. For everything." He shook it firmly. "Take care of yourself, Miss Sinclair, and take care of that little girl. The world needs more women like you." I walked out of the precinct with a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in months. Thorne was locked up. Alexander was behind bars. Christine, though gone, had been avenged. But there was still a shadow on my horizon. A shadow that materialized the moment I stepped out of the elevator at my penthouse. Patricia Montgomery, Alexander's mother. She was waiting by my door, dressed in a black suit as if she were in mourning, even though nobody had died. Her face etched with wrinkles of pure bitterness twisted into a snarl when she saw me. "Isabella," she spat, "I need to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about, Patricia. About my son. About what you did to him. I didn't do anything to him. He dug his own grave. You ruined him. You took everything. The company, the money, his dignity. Dignity is lost by one's own actions, Patricia. Your son lost his a long time ago." She took a step forward, her eyes brimming with toxic rage. "You are a harpy, a heartless bitch. My son gave you everything, and you destroyed him. Your son gave me lies, humiliations, and a collection of venereal diseases I had to cure in secret. Your son planned to murder me to steal my inheritance. Your son is a monster, and you know it." Patricia opened her mouth to argue, but she couldn't find the words. She stood there, trembling fists, clenched eyes full of tears she refused to let fall. "Leave, Patricia," I said, unlocking the door to the penthouse. "Leave and never come back. Your son is no longer my problem, and neither are you." I stepped inside and slammed the door behind me. I leaned against the wood and closed my eyes. I had won, but the victory tasted like ash. Time passed. I don't know if it was weeks or months, but time moved forward. My daughter was born on a Tuesday in November at 3:00 a.m. after 12 grueling hours of labor. I named her Sophia, the name my grandmother always wanted for my firstborn. She weighed 7.5 pounds, and when the nurses placed her on my chest for the first time, I knew every ounce of the fight had been worth it. My father cried when he saw her. My mother, who had flown in from their estate in the Hamptons that morning, kept repeating that she looked exactly like me as a newborn. Harrison came to the hospital with a bouquet of flowers so massive it barely fit through the door. Marcus waited in the hall with a smile I hadn't seen in years. But there was an absence I felt more profoundly than I expected. The absence of a father who would never know his daughter. The absence of a man who chose money and power over watching his own blood grow up. But I didn't feel sadness. I felt pure relief. The first few months were brutal. Sleepless nights, feedings every 3 hours, endless diapers. But they were also the happiest months of my life. For the first time, I had something that was entirely mine, something no one could take from me. During those early quiet days, Sophia learned to crawl, pulled herself up on the edge of the coffee table, and spoke her first wobbly words. Every smile was a triumph. Every babble was a promise. I hired a nanny, a wonderful woman named Rose in her 50s, with decades of experience and an immense capacity for love. But even with her help, I spent every possible second with Sophia. I bathed her, dressed her, rocked her to sleep. Meanwhile, I rebuilt my professional life. The Sinclair Group had taken a hit during the scandal, but with my father temporarily back on the board and Harrison running point on legal, we righted the ship. I liquidated unprofitable divisions. I aggressively invested in green tech and expanded into international markets. By Sophia's first birthday, I had doubled its net valuation. It was during one of those new ventures that I met Dan. It happened at an orphanage on the outskirts of Brooklyn. An old, dilapidated brick building, the Sinclair Group, had decided to completely renovate as part of our corporate philanthropy initiatives. I had gone to inspect the site with Harrison and a few executives. The facility was called Hope House. It sheltered about 40 children, mostly wards of the state, or kids pulled from broken homes. The director, a nun named Sister Angela, welcomed us with a warm smile and coffee that tasted like heaven. "Miss Sinclair," Sister Angela said, shaking my hand warmly, "you have no idea how much we appreciate your generosity. These children need a dignified place to grow up. It's the least I can do, sister. Childhood is the foundation of everything." As we toured the facility, I noticed a young man around 35 working in one of the classrooms. He was kneeling on the floor, surrounded by kids, building something out of wooden blocks. He was laughing with them, explaining structural balance with infinite patience, and the kids looked at him with an adoration only children possess. "Who is that?" I asked Sister Angela. Dan Hayes. He's an architect. He comes twice a week to volunteer with the kids. They adore him. Does he work for a major firm? No, he's independent. Small projects, renovations, things like that. He's a good man, but he hasn't had an easy life. I don't know what compelled me to walk over. Maybe it was the way the children looked at him. Maybe it was the natural ease with which he moved among them. Or maybe it was just raw curiosity. "Excuse me," I said, interrupting their tower building. "I'm Isabella Sinclair." Dan looked up. He had warm, amber-brown eyes with a spark of sharp intelligence that didn't go unnoticed. He stood up, dusted his hands on his faded jeans, and offered me a genuine smile. "Dan Hayes. Nice to meet you. Sister Angela tells me you're an architect. Architect, carpenter, plumber, electrician, a bit of everything, really. In this city, you learn to do whatever it takes to survive. And what do you think of the renovation plans?" Dan looked around the room, evaluating the peeling paint, the cracked plaster ceiling, the drafty windows. "I think these kids deserve better, and you're doing a great job providing it. But there's something you don't like." He laughed. A frank, unpretentious sound. An architect always finds something he doesn't like, but it's nothing that can't be fixed. The classroom layouts, for example. They're facing north, which means they get terrible natural light during the winter. If we punched out the south-facing walls and added larger windows, we'd gain heat and light without jacking up the HVAC budget. I made a mental note. This guy knew his stuff. "How would you like to oversee the entire renovation?" I asked on impulse. Dan looked at me stunned. "Excuse me, I need someone who understands the project intimately, who understands the kids' needs and isn't afraid to push back on corporate blueprints. You seem to fit the bill." "Miss Sinclair, I'm a solo contractor. I don't have a massive firm behind me. I don't care. I prefer working with people over corporations." Dan hesitated. He looked at the kids who were still stacking the wooden blocks and then back at me. "I accept," he said, "but on one condition." "Name it." "I keep my volunteer hours. I want to keep playing with the kids. I won't let the job take away the things that actually matter." I smiled. It had been a very long time since someone surprised me. Deal. Over the next few months, Dan and I worked side by side overhauling Hope House. He arrived exactly on time, every morning, blueprints tucked under his arm, sporting a smile that lit up the grimmest rooms. We argued over materials, deadlines, budgets. But we also talked about life, about dreams, about the invisible scars we both carried. One afternoon, while grabbing coffee at a bodega near the site, Dan asked me a question. "Why do you do all this? The renovation, the foundation, the time you spend with the kids. It's not just PR. It's obvious you care." "Because nobody handed me a perfect world," I answered. "My grandmother taught me that money is just a tool, not the endgame. True wealth is what you give back to the world." "Your grandmother sounds like an extraordinary woman." She was. More than you could imagine. "And what about you?" "My old man was a piece of work," Dan said, his voice dropping. "Cheated on my mom, beat her, left us with nothing. When he walked out, I was 12. I swore I would never be like him. And you succeeded. I try to be the exact opposite every day. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. My mom died when I was 20. Cancer. But really it was the stress. The doctor said it was genetic, but I know my dad killed her even if he wasn't the one who put her in the ground. Silence settled between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of recognition. Two souls meeting in the dark and realizing they aren't alone. Thanks for telling me, I said. Thanks for listening. Over time, our relationship deepened. Dan met Sophia. He played with her, holding her while I took endless conference calls. Rose, the nanny, noted that Sophia was always calmer when Dan was around. I felt calmer when he was around, too. But something kept me from taking the next step. Fear. The fear of trusting again. The fear of making another catastrophic mistake. Alexander had left me with scars that didn't show, but still burned. One evening after wrapping up a site walkthrough, Dan invited me to dinner. Not a date, he clarified. Just two friends eating food. I accepted. We went to a small, hole-in-the-wall Italian place in Greenwich Village, run by an elderly couple who cooked like angels. We ate, we talked, we laughed. For a few hours, I forgot who I was. I forgot the weight of the Sinclair name. I forgot the shadows of my past. Isabella, Dan said, as the tiramisu arrived. There's something I want to tell you. Tell me. I know you've been through hell. I know trusting someone must feel impossible right now. But I want you to know I'm not like the others. I don't give a damn about your money, your last name, or your corporate empire. I care about you. The woman who fights for the kids at the orphanage. The mother who sings lullabies to her baby. The person who looks a stranger in the eye and hands him a shot at something great. I didn't know what to say. The words caught in my throat. I'm not asking you to love me back right now, he continued. I'm not asking for blind trust. I'm just asking for a chance to prove to you that love doesn't always have to hurt. Dan, You don't have to answer now. I just needed you to know. He paid the check before I could protest, walked me to my waiting SUV, kissed my cheek, and said goodnight with that same warm smile. That night when I got home, I sat by Sophia's crib and watched her sleep. Her breathing was soft, rhythmic, peaceful. Her tiny hand rested open on the blanket, completely trusting. What do I do? Little one, I whispered. Do I take the risk or stay locked in my tower? Sophia didn't answer, but her small hand curled into a fist as if grabbing onto something invisible. Maybe it was a sign. 2 weeks passed. We kept working together, laughing, sharing moments, but I avoided the topic of the dinner. I avoided his lingering gazes. I steered clear of anything too personal, until the day everything shattered. We were at the orphanage reviewing the final punch list for the renovation. The kids were out in the yard and the building was dead quiet. Dan had his back to me measuring a drywall frame. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Speak. Miss. Sinclair, this is Detective Miller. I have some urgent news. My heart kicked into overdrive. Tell me, Detective. Alexander Montgomery has escaped from federal custody. The world stopped spinning. How he was being transported to a medical facility this morning? The transport van was ambushed by heavily armed men. The guards are in critical condition, but they'll pull through. Alexander is gone. Turns out he had a hidden crypto wallet we didn't know about. He used it to pay for outside help. When did this happen? 3 hours ago. The FBI is locking down the tri-state area, but we have no solid leads. Do you think he's coming for me? It's highly probable. We want to put you in protective custody immediately. No need. I have my own security detail. Miss Sinclair, this is extremely serious. Alexander has nothing to lose, and the men who broke him out are Tier 1 professionals. I appreciate the warning, Detective. Thank you. I hung up and stared blindly at my phone. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped it. What's wrong? Dan asked, turning around, sensing the vacuum in the room. Alexander escaped from prison. Dan dropped his measuring tape, what he broke out, with outside help, and he's coming for me. You need to leave. Right now. Go somewhere safe. No. If I hide, I give him the power. I'm going to face him. Isabella, that's suicide. The man wants to kill you, I know. But if I run, I'll be running for the rest of my life. I refuse to live like that. Dan closed the distance between us, grabbed me by the shoulders, and forced me to look at him. Then you aren't fighting him alone. I'm staying with you. Dan, you can't. I can and I will. I'm not letting anything happen to you. This isn't your fight. You've been my fight since the day I saw you walk into this building. His words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. But it wasn't pain. It was a feeling I hadn't experienced in a very long time. Something I thought had died inside me. Dan, don't say anything else. Just Promise me you won't do anything reckless without telling me first. I can't promise that. Then promise me you'll trust me. I looked into his eyes. I saw raw honesty. I saw a man who didn't want my fortune or my influence. I saw a man who simply wanted to stand by my side in the dark. I promise, he said. That evening I rushed back to the penthouse. Marcus was waiting in the foyer with news that froze the blood in my veins. We got intel on Alexander. He's in Brooklyn. A spotter saw him in East New York 2 hours ago. Are you sure? The source is bulletproof. And there's more. What? He's not alone. He's got at least 3 ex-military mercenaries with him. Our contacts say they have a specific objective: to kill me, to kill you, and take Sophia. The air vanished from my lungs. My hands instantly flew to my stomach even though Sophia wasn't there anymore. She was down the hall asleep in her crib, completely oblivious to the monster hunting her. Lock down the building. I ordered a new lethal calm washing over me. Double the perimeter. I want 2 men stationed outside Sophia's door. 24/7. Done. But Isabella, playing defense isn't enough. If he wants to breach this place, eventually he'll find a way. Then we take the offense. Call Harrison. Tell him I need him here first thing in the morning with every single file we have on Alexander's old contacts. Marcus nodded and stepped away to make the calls. I stood alone in the living room, staring out at the glittering skyline. Alexander had returned. And this time, I wasn't going to stop until he was dead, or rotting in a black site. The next morning, Harrison arrived with a briefcase bulging with files. Everything is in here, he said, dumping the folders on the glass table. Informants, bank logs, old associates. Everything you need to bury him alive. I don't want to bury him alive, Harrison. I want him dead. Harrison stared at me. Isabella, you can't be serious. I am dead serious. That man broke out of federal custody. He hired mercenaries. He wants to kidnap my daughter. I am not going to sit around waiting for him to kick my door in. What are you going to do? Set a trap? What kind of trap? One he can't resist. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I hadn't called in a year. The burner number for Silas Thorne. Mr. Thorne, I said when the call connected through the prison switchboard system I knew he controlled. It's Isabella Sinclair. I need your help. My help. Thorne's voice sounded genuinely shocked. I was under the impression we were mortal enemies. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, and we share a mutual problem, Alexander. Ah, yes, he escaped, and he wants me dead. But you have your own reasons to hate him. He lost your money. He got you locked up. What's your proposal? A temporary alliance. Give me his location, and I will miraculously forget the evidence keeping you in a maximum security cell. And if I refuse, then I'll make sure the feds find the rest of your offshore ledgers and you die in that cage. Silence. Then the calculating hum of a predator weighing his options. What do you need? Where is he hiding? Who is with him? When does he plan to attack? I can get that intel. But you'll have to wait. I don't have time to wait. Then you'll have to trust me. I don't trust anyone. But I believe in aligned interests. Do we have a deal? I'll call you back in 24 hours. I hung up and looked at Harrison, who was watching me with a mix of awe and absolute terror. You just made a pact with the devil. The devil knows his way around hell, Harrison. And I need a tour guide. Isabella, this is beyond dangerous. Everything is dangerous. But I'd rather die swinging than live cowering in a panic room. The next 24 hours dragged like wet cement. I didn't sleep. I barely ate. I spent hours sitting by Sophia's crib stroking her hair, memorizing the heat of her skin. Every second with her was a gift Alexander was actively trying to steal. At 8:00 p.m. the following night, the burner phone rang. I have the intel, Thorne said. Alexander is holed up in an abandoned industrial warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. He has 3 shooters with him. He plans to breach your penthouse tomorrow at dawn, right when your security shifts change. How do you know this? I have a mole inside his crew. He owes me his life. What's your recommendation? Hit him tonight, catch them off guard. If you wait until tomorrow, you're dead. I'll send 2 of my best outside men to clear the perimeter for you. But I want my payment. Once Alexander is neutralized, my lawyers will ensure your evidence file gets heavily corrupted. Deal. I hung up and turned to Marcus. Mount up. We're hitting him tonight. We're Red Hook. Warehouse District. Pier 14. Are you sure? Absolutely. I'm going with you. No. You stay here. You lock down with Sophia. Marcus, I am giving you a direct order. If anything happens to me tonight, you take Sophia and you fly her out of the country. Take her to my father's compound in Europe. Do not let her out of your sight for a single second. I will, but you're coming back. You have to. I'll do my best. I changed into black tactical clothing. Practical, dark, agile. I slid the 9mm into my jacket pocket. I shoved an extra magazine into the other pocket. Before leaving, I walked into Sophia's room. She was sound asleep, her tiny fist clutching her blanket. I leaned down and pressed my lips to her forehead. Mommy's coming back, baby girl. I promise. I walked out of the penthouse without looking back. In the lobby, the elevator doors opened and Dan stepped out. Where are you going, he asked, taking in my all-black attire. To finish this. Once and for all, I'm going with you. No, Dan. This is not your fight. You are my fight. You could die tonight. Then we'll die together. I don't plan on dying. Neither do I. But if things go to hell, I want you by my side. I looked into his eyes. There was fear, yes. But overriding it all was an ironclad determination. And love. Let's go, I said. But you do exactly what I tell you. Deal. We drove Dan's beat-up Ford pickup out of Manhattan. As the engine rumbled, and the bright lights of the city faded into the grimy industrial sprawl of Brooklyn, I knew tonight would end it all, one way or another. The Red Hook warehouse loomed out of the darkness like a decaying concrete monster. Dan parked the truck 2 blocks away, hidden in the shadows of a defunct shipping yard. He killed the engine, and we sat in silence listening to the pounding of our hearts. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Dan asked, his hand resting on the door handle. I don't want to. I have to. We could call the NYPD right now. Let SWAT handle it. The police will show up when it's all over. I need to be the one who ends this. Dan nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't try to play the hero and stop me. He simply opened the door and stepped out into the freezing night. The wind off the East River cut like a knife. We walked in silence through deserted, trash-strewn streets, dodging the orange glow of broken street lamps, sticking to the brick walls like ghosts. I kept my hand wrapped around the grip of the 9mm inside my pocket, my thumb resting securely against the safety ready for anything. There, Dan whispered, pointing to a massive, corrugated metal building at the end of the pier. Warehouse 14. Its windows were shattered, and a heavy rolling cargo door was cranked open about 2 feet off the ground. A faint, sickly yellow light spilled out from inside. Wait here, I whispered. Like hell I will. If you go in there alone, you're dead. If I go in, I might die. If you come in, you might die. And I couldn't live with that. I looked at him. There was zero hesitation in his eyes. Stay behind me, I ordered. And if things go sideways, you run. You don't look back. You just run. I'm not running. It's an order. I don't work for you, Isabella. I'm the man who loves you, and men who truly love don't abandon the woman they love in the dark. I clenched my jaw. There was no time to argue. Let's go. We crept toward the warehouse. I slipped under the heavy steel door. Dan, right behind me. We crouched in the shadows of the massive, cavernous space. It was mostly empty, save for some rotting wooden crates stacked in the corners. In the dead center of the room, a single exposed bulb hung from a wire, illuminating a wooden table and a folding chair. And sitting at that table with his back to us was a figure I would recognize anywhere. Alexander. He was wearing the same tailored suit he had on the day I kicked him out, though now it was filthy wrinkled and stained. His perfectly coiffed hair hung in greasy strands over his forehead. In his right hand, he clutched a half-empty bottle of cheap whiskey. Are you going to stand there in the dark all night, Isabella? He called out without turning around. Come into the light. I've been waiting for you. My stomach plummeted. He knew. It was a setup. I stepped out of the shadows. Dan followed, staying a few paces behind me. Alexander stood up and turned around slowly. When he saw me, a twisted, jagged smirk broke across his face. I knew you'd come. You were always so entirely predictable. Predictable. I let out a dry laugh. If I were predictable, you wouldn't be hiding in a rat-infested warehouse. I'm in this warehouse because of you. You're in this warehouse because of your own choices. I just provided the consequences. Alexander slammed the whiskey bottle down on the table. He swayed slightly heavily intoxicated, but managed to keep his footing. Did you bring your new boyfriend? He sneered, looking at Dan with utter disgust. How touching. The blue-collar hero coming to save the damsel in distress. I'm no damsel, I shot back. And he's not my boyfriend. Oh, then what is he? Just another idiot you're using. I'm the man who loves her, Dan interjected, taking a step forward. Something you clearly never knew how to do. Alexander laughed. A bitter, broken sound. Love. You think this is about love. This is about power. It has always been about power. Power without love is nothing, Dan said. Power is everything, Alexander screamed, his voice echoing off the corrugated steel. And you, Isabella, you took everything from me. I took what was never yours to begin with. I yelled back. The company was mine. The money was mine. The penthouse was mine. Everything you thought you owned, I let you borrow. And now the lease is up. Alexander sneered and reached his hand into his suit jacket. Instinctively, I drew the 9mm, clicked off the safety, and aimed center mass. Don't make a sudden move. Alexander smiled. He slowly pulled his hand out of his jacket. He wasn't holding a gun. He was holding a cell phone. I'm not going to shoot you, Isabella. That would be far too easy. I want you to suffer. I want you to know exactly what it feels like to lose your entire world. What did you do? I put a bounty on your daughter's head. The world went violently silent. I felt all the blood drain from my face. What I hired a specialist. If I don't call this phone by midnight to call him off, he's going to breach your penthouse and slaughter that little brat. And then he'll kill your loyal dog, Marcus, your sweet nanny, and anyone else breathing inside that apartment. My hands began to shake. The gun trembled in my grip. You are a monster. I am a desperate man. And desperate men do terrible things. What do you want, Alexander? I want you to transfer all the untraceable crypto reserves you have hidden in the corporate shadow accounts to this cold wallet. And I want you to sign a legally binding confession stating you framed me for everything. Do that, and then you leave the country and never come back. And if I refuse, then your young daughter dies tonight, and you get to live the rest of your miserable life knowing you could have saved her, but you chose your money instead. I looked at Dan. His face was pale, but his eyes burned with a lethal fury. Don't give him what he wants, Dan whispered. He's bluffing. I'm not bluffing, Alexander said, waving the phone. My man is sitting in a van outside your building right now. He's just waiting for the clock to strike 12. How do I know he won't kill Sophia anyway, even if I comply? You don't. You'll just have to trust me. Trust you. I let out a hysterical laugh. After everything you've done to me, trust is your only collateral. I stared at the phone in his hand. I stared at his face, ravaged by alcohol and pure malice. And then I understood. Alexander was never going to let Sophia live. Regardless of what I signed or transferred, my daughter was condemned in his mind. The only variable was whether I died with her or not. Fine, I said, slowly lowering the gun. I'll sign whatever you want. Isabella, no, Dan protested. Shut up, Dan, I snapped. This isn't your call. Alexander smiled triumphantly. He pulled a folded legal document from his inside pocket and smoothed it out on the table. Sign here, and initial every page. I walked up to the table. I took the cheap ballpoint pen he offered me. My fingers were trembling, but not from fear, from absolute rage. Before putting the pen to the paper, I held it suspended in the air. I want to know one thing. What? Did you ever love me? Or was it all a lie from the very first day? Alexander looked at me. For a fraction of a second, I saw something resembling regret in his eyes, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. I loved you, he said softly. At first, when I thought you were just a sweet, hardworking girl who admired me. But when I found out who you really were, when I realized you had more money and power than I could ever dream of, I started to hate you. Why? Because it made me feel small. Because every time I looked at you, I saw a woman who could crush me like an insect without breaking a sweat. And I couldn't live with that. You preferred to destroy me rather than accept I was your equal. I preferred to destroy you rather than admit I needed you. I sighed. There was nothing left to say. There was no redemption for this man. I raised the pen to sign the paper, but instead of touching the ink to the page, I dropped the pen onto the concrete floor. I'm not signing. Alexander frowned. What? I said I'm not signing. I would rather watch my empire burn than give you the satisfaction of seeing me surrender. Are you insane? I'll kill her? No, Alexander. For the first time in my life, I'm completely sane. I pulled my cell phone from my pocket and dialed a number. It was picked up on the first ring. Marcus. Status. All clear, Miss Sinclair. Sophia is sleeping like an angel. Any breaches? We spotted a guy in a utility van scoping the service entrance. My guys pulled him out. He's currently zip-tied in the back of one of our armored SUVs, and an FBI task force is 2 minutes away to pick him up. Good. Hold the line. I lowered the phone and looked dead into Alexander's eyes. His face had completely collapsed. How... Did you really think I wouldn't take precautions? I reinforced the penthouse with the most lethal private security money can buy. Your hitman is currently waiting to be handed over to federal agents. Your plan failed. Blind, primal fury overtook him. He lunged toward me, fists clenched his eyes, bloodshot and unhinged. I'll kill you, he roared. I'll kill you with my bare hands. He raised his arm to strike me. But before he could complete the motion, a deafening gunshot ripped through the warehouse. Alexander froze. He looked down at his chest where a dark crimson stain was rapidly expanding across his white dress shirt. Then he looked up at me with an expression of total shock. You, he gasped. Me, I replied, the barrel of the 9mm still smoking in my steady hand. Alexander dropped to his knees. He swayed once, twice. Then he pitched forward, collapsing face first onto the concrete floor. His eyes remained open, staring at absolutely nothing. Silence slammed back into the warehouse. The only sounds were the buzzing of the exposed light bulb and my own ragged breathing. Isabella, Dan said, rushing to my side. Are you okay? I didn't answer. I lowered the gun and stared at Alexander's lifeless body. The man who had humiliated me, cheated on me, stolen from me. The man who planned my murder and put a hit on my young daughter. He was lying on the floor dead like a rabid dog that finally had to be put down. You were right, I whispered. Revenge tastes like ash. This wasn't revenge, Dan said, wrapping his arms tightly around me. It was self-defense. I rested my head against his chest and closed my eyes. The tears I had held back for so long finally began to fall. The NYPD arrived 20 minutes later. Detective Miller, tipped off by an anonymous 911 call from a burner phone, processed the scene. A dead fugitive, a woman holding a gun, and a witness who corroborated the events. I spent 3 hours at the precinct repeating my statement over and over. I handed over the evidence of Alexander's threats, the audio recordings of his murder plots, the proof of his attempted kidnapping. Detective Miller, bearing an expression of infinite exhaustion, finally closed his notepad. Technically, under New York law, going to that warehouse instead of retreating makes this complicated, he declared. But considering he was an armed, escaped federal fugitive who lured you there under imminent threat to your child, and given that Harrison's legal army has been breathing down the DA's neck all morning, no prosecutor in this city is going to touch this. The DA is declining to press charges. Officially, it's a closed case. Thank you, Detective. Don't thank me, Miss Sinclair. I just hope you can sleep at night. I will. For the first time in a very long time, I will. When I walked out of the precinct, the sun was just beginning to rise over the Manhattan skyline. Dan was waiting for me by the doors, 2 coffees in hand. How are you holding up? He asked. Empty, I replied. But free. What do you want to do now? Go home. See Sophia. Hold her until we both fall asleep. I'll take you. We barely spoke during the drive, but his hand intertwined with mine said more than any words ever could. When we reached the penthouse, Marcus opened the door. He wore a look of profound relief I had never seen on his stoic face. Miss Sinclair, he said, I'm so glad you're safe. Thank you, Marcus. And thank you for handling the threat downstairs. Take the rest of the week off. You've earned it. Thank you, ma'am. I sprinted down the hallway. I pushed open the door to Sophia's nursery and found her fast asleep, her tiny fist curled by her cheek just like always. I dropped to my knees beside her crib and gently stroked her soft face. Mommy came back, baby girl, I whispered, and I'm never leaving you again. Sophia fluttered, her eyes open for a second, looked at me as if she understood, and offered a sleepy, gummy smile. Then she closed her eyes and drifted back to sleep. 6 months passed. 6 months of intense therapy, of rebuilding, of learning how to breathe without anticipating a knife in the back. 6 months in which Dan and I carefully built a relationship rooted in mutual respect, radical honesty, and deep trust. 6 months in which Sophia grew into a fearless, energetic toddler. Our wedding was small, intimate. We held it in the gardens of my father's estate in the Hamptons, overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The guest list was tight. My parents, Harrison Marcus, sister Angela, and a dozen kids from Hope House. Dan wore a navy blue tailored suit that fit him perfectly. I wore a simple white silk dress, no massive train, no diamonds, no pretensions. Are you sure about this? Dan asked me, just minutes before we walked down the aisle. I have never been more sure of anything in my entire life. After everything you've survived, exactly because of what I've survived, I walked through hell, Dan, and I made it out alive. I deserve to be happy. And I deserve to spend the rest of my life making you happy. We kissed beneath an arch of white hydrangeas while the orphanage kids threw flower petals into the ocean breeze, the late afternoon sun dipping toward the water. A year later, we were on the beach in Nantucket, watching Sophia chase the receding tide. Dan scooped her up, lifting her high into the air, making her squeal with uncontrollable toddler laughter. I watched them from a beach chair, a permanent smile etched into my face. "Mommy, Mommy!" Sophia shrieked, running toward me through the sand. Daddy lifted me to the sky. "Did you like it?" "Yes, again, Daddy, again!" Dan scooped her up again, spinning her around. She laughed the pure, uninhibited laugh of a child who has never known fear. "Are you happy?" Dan asked, walking over and sitting down next to me on the blanket. "Completely. Do you regret anything, only that I didn't meet you sooner? We still have time to make up for it. We have a whole lifetime for it." He leaned in and kissed me. A long, slow kiss full of promises that I knew he would actually keep. Sophia tugged on his shirt, demanding more airplane rides, and the three of us lost ourselves among the crashing waves, the golden sun, and the absolute certainty that after the most violent storms, the calm always returns. That night, after we put Sophia to bed, I sat out on the back deck of the beach house with a glass of wine. Dan was asleep on the couch inside, exhausted from playing in the sand all day. The ocean shimmered under the moonlight, vast and indifferent to human suffering. I took out my phone and pulled up a digital news archive I had saved months ago. Disgraced investor Silas Thorne found dead in federal prison. Authorities rule apparent suicide. I read the headline one last time. Then I permanently deleted the bookmark and turned off the screen. Alexander was dead. Christine was dead. Thorne was dead. The ledgers were balanced. The debts were paid. But I was still alive. My daughter was alive. And Dan, the man who taught me that love wasn't supposed to be a battlefield, was sleeping on my couch waiting to wake up next to me tomorrow. "It's over," I whispered to the salty ocean wind. "It's really over." I turned off the deck lights and walked inside. I stopped at Sophia's door to check on her. She was breathing softly, clutching a stuffed bear to her chest. "I love you, little one," I whispered into the dark. "More than anything in this world." I closed her door with a soft click and slid into bed next to Dan. Without waking up, he draped his heavy arm over my waist and pulled me flush against his back. "Love you," he mumbled into his pillow. "I love you too," I whispered back. And for the first time in years, I closed my eyes and slept without nightmares, without sudden panic, without fear. I just slept.